Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two marvelous poets with us today, Lory Bedikian and William Archila. Lory will read first and then William. Lory Bedikian's collection, The Book of Lamenting, won the Philip Levine Prize. Her forthcoming book, Jadidiker, Apology to the Body, won the 2023 Prairie Schooner Roz Shoemaker Book Prize, forthcoming September 2024 from the University of Nebraska Press. That's where I'm from, Nebraska. Bedikian's poems received the Neruda Prize for Poetry in the 2022 Nimrod Literary Awards. She has been featured on Hadrag O Tuama's, pardon my pronunciation, Poetry Unbound podcast. Her work is included in the anthology Borderlines, Poems of Migration, Kanop, 2020. Bedikian's manuscript in progress received a 2021 grant from the Money for Women / Barbara Deming Memorial Fund. New work appears in Massachusetts Review's Revisiting Woman. Here's an outstanding poet, Lory Bedikian.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I'm very, very honored to be here. Mr. Northup, thank you. I thank you, Harry, and I want to thank Beth Ruscio, who was the person who connected us, the amazing Beth. And we remember Holly today, fine poet. I like Allegra, Jennifer, and team. Whoever I didn't remember to thank, I apologize. Know in your hearts that I thank you deeply. It's an honor to be here. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to start with the first poem. Well, let me just say one little thing about myself that's not in my fancy schmancy bio, which is I was born in San Francisco. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and much of that informs my work. But I'll just start reading. Because I think that's safest. So I'm going to start with the first poem of my first book, The Book of Lamenting. Beyond the mouth. On the back of every tongue in my family, there is a dove that lives and dies. At night, when my aunts and uncles sleep, the birds comb their feathers, sharpen beaks. They are carriers not only of the olive branch, but the rest of our histories too. As from the ark we came in twos, which tired eyes from Lebanon, Syria, the outskirts of Armenia, anywhere safety, said its final prayers and died. Like every simile ever written, the doves on our tongues are tired and misread. Dinners begin with mounds of bread, dialogues piled between the older men. Near our dark throats, the quiet birds lurk to watch meals descend, take phrases that didn't reach the truth and spin them into nests. Now and then, we spit them out in shapes of seeds, olive pits, spines of fish. The men never watch what enters past their teeth, what leaves their moving lips. And the doves know this. The women shut their mouths when they don't approve of the squawking laughs. There is a saying, or at least there should be, that if one doesn't believe what is said or true, they can ask the dove on the back of the tongue, and it will chirp the ugliness or the pitted truth of how we choke on what we hide. So that is the first poem in my book, The Book of Lamenting. And I want to kind of bookend the voices of these poems. So I'm going to read the first poem of the book and the last poem of the book. And I'm not going to give too much. I'm a talker. I am a talker. So I'm controlling myself with all my little pitter patter in between. This is Self-Portrait with Crane. On road trips, no coastal fog rolling in brings me the seagull or sandpiper shifting from water to sky, but the common Armenian crane who treks across the Atlantic, breaks through California clouds, haunts the laurels, the eucalyptus, a message tucked in its beak. In riffs strummed on Midwestern guitars, I can hear the duduk hound me with its drone of apricot wood, piping a monotone dirge, driven like the tumbleweed. In New Mexico, each flute player's eye turns into the pomegranate seed. Going east should bring foliage, but I see the blue eye in trees. For days, New England's sediment drops into riverbeds, bends into Gorky's brush strokes. No relief. Ghosts float west from Ellis Island, crosses tattooed on their forearms, worry beads pebbled in their grip. Even as I watch the World Series, a fly ball turns into the crane. So that's it for my first book. I'll say a little bit more about myself before I read this next poem. My mother passed away March 5th, 2020, right as the pandemic began, right as we were all running around looking for toilet paper, right as suddenly my children who were not versed on the computer have to come home and work on the computer and all that kind of stuff. And of course, just like the rest of the world, it was somewhat traumatizing. And a year before that, my father passed away. And a year within that, my father-in-law, my suegro, passed away. So I began to realize that I can either move into that sort of mini hell known as depression, or I can put it into form. I can form my sadness into art. And so that is what my second book is informed by. And this is going to be the opening of my second book, Ode to Their Leaving. As if the sky which darkened on that monumental day, the day Lebanon would be left behind for you both, the day all relations, kin, unshaven onlookers gritted their teeth, or the Kiwatsis, village women, began the ritual of tears. Handkerchiefs tied to the trees, the sheep slaughtered for the last feast. As if the flight above the Atlantic and all the cirrus clouds bowing to the course, the passport the husband opens and closes over and over again, knowing he may lose them all. To another set of civil unrests, another war calculated like the backgammon board, too large and burdensome to bring along. As if the teeth of the East Coast's cold, the stifled air of the small apartments that led to the lies of losing jobs that said would replenish the spent money. As if all of this was not enough of a cauldron, a wingless griffin. The husband dies first, a year later the wife dies, and these two called father, mother, in one's eeriest and quietest sleep, not birth-like or dream-like, but the time of post-midnight hallucinatory lullabies and afterthoughts. Why do you not say who you are? Say it. Say, daughter. Daughter holding genetics of immigrant ink stains, holding the small histories of their breakfast blabbering. And so what did you know of their demise? Father scanned the news of the world, knew the guilt of countries and mustached biographies, while he never spoke of his ills. The spine fractured, the valves roadblocked, the vocal cords bombed. If anger was his food, then food was his poison. The bites didn't matter. The morsels mother fed him mocked even the smallest capillaries. And mother, did you tell him what was coming, or did you decide to follow? Is it a daughter's greatest sin to ask? But look how quiet I am. I watch the world cry itself to sleep. I pinch the spices into their bowls as you did the day you were married, as you did on the unbelievable days you died. So, a lot happens in someone's life. People pass, people live, people are born, wars, all kinds of stuff. One thing that I unfortunately experienced in my life was shame. Shame was big. Shame was a big, big deal. And speaking of shame, I was sort of shamed into not speaking about the fact that I had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And now I am, working on my courage to be able to speak about all kinds of things. This poem is also in my second book, and I'm very grateful for Tin House, Miramar, Nimrod International Journal, these wonderful journals that have published my poems and given me strength and courage to continue. Apology to the body. Sorry for mercury strewn in veins of fish, for traces of carbon monoxide loose in the air, for radiation that circles and enters the aura. Sorry for deliberate puffs and sips late in the night, for an empty stomach burning with coffee grounds, for words of magma, thoughts rough as tufa, scratching the indivisible cells, fragile nerves, divisions of labor and function. For scraping skin until it bled, garnet scars in constellation form, for chemicals bathing in a pool of genetics under viral stars. I'm looking to cleanse regret. I want to give you a balm for lesions, give you evening primrose, milk thistle, turmeric barrage. Feet moving toward a language of trees, hands deciphering sediment, steady rhythm back in the pulse, the breathing you knew before you were born. Believe me that we began together, and I will mend each sheath of myelin, reverse the dark that grows behind my eyes. And I want to do this. I want to close with this poem, and I want to say a few things before I read this poem. So today I'm reading with William Archila. I have the honor of being married to the guy, and I can't see his face right now, but that's okay. I'm sure he's laughing. And I want to say it's interesting because I feel like I brought whatever's good in life to the marriage. Just kidding. And the one thing that William brought into my life to a level that I had not experienced was jazz. And I feel that jazz is one of the greatest inventions of all time. And I want to thank him for that, for bringing jazz to that level. I had listened to jazz before, but he brought it to my life to a level that I had not experienced. He kept asking me, have you heard this? Have you heard this song? Do you know this musician? Well, have you heard him play trombone while he's on the alto sax? And I'm thinking, if only he was paid for this. Anyhow, I want to thank you all for listening. I think I'll just finish with this poem. It's a little longer, and it's a completely different note, and it's not in either of my books. So that just shows that people don't know how to have a good time, because I sent it out. Nobody picked it up, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I hope it brings you joy, because it brought me joy when I wrote it. completely different note. What it's like listening to Lester Young. Between 5th and 6th Streets, where cabs run stoplights, where liquor store owners lean, where street people chum around, there's a small no-name dive known as the Swig. And I'm sitting at the bar, my black dress wrinkled, my hair a mop, one high heel moping far below my foot. And I know, and the bartender knows, it's not a good idea to ask me anything. So instead, he refills a vodka mix straight to my glass, extra olives, wipes the bar as if to say, "We're keeping it clean, sweetheart." I guess he knows this scene. It must be the way I came in with vaudeville, cursing all men in my bebop boogie rhythm, wet polka dots on my handkerchief, mascara running like drenched moonbeams. Perhaps the request for 50 martinis to toast the 50 louses I was completely wrong about. This goes on and on until I begin to blame the devil that my lighter won't work, a cigarette dangling off my lower lip. And he enters. At first, I want to hate him. I want him to try something foolish, so I can say I once slugged a guy at the Swig. But he's got this walk, an easy does it kind of saunter, straight out of a black and white flick. Cool bass notes that make you inhale, exhale a long drag of smoke. The walk's coming my way. He's got a suit the color of a city's night sky, a necktie on holiday, a chin that could gamble and win a bet on anything, a reckless trench coat, a hat you want to tilt when you get to know him by name. He's so beautiful. I wish my shoe was on. He pulls a lighter out of that coat, his hand as slow as a tango, flame to tip like a paper moon on fire. Halfway through my puff, he walks away. The nerve of some guys, I mumble. He thinks he's so hip, so sophisticated, thinks one little thing can send me, that I'm easy to figure, like a faucet, thinks he's number 51. That chance, what nerve? As if he's Aladdin's lamp and I've got ballads in my eyes, stardust on my sleeve, as if he's the only thing east of the sun. Men are funny that way, thinking that one little sparks a symphony, that I would be so impressed watching him float right back out that door, taking his walk with him. So fine, so mellow. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lory. You know, some of your themes, humanity, family, ancestry, lamentation, you know, within the themes and the way you write, there's a deep resonance and a strength of narrative, and it's really spellbinding. And also, I deeply appreciate your embracing, whatever it is, illness or death or whatever it is. I always love that too, to embrace your fears and then to transcend that with your art, which you said you do, and you do that marvelously. And
thank you.
So I'm thankful. You know, I may be redundant, but I'm thankful for your generosity of heart and for your love. And there's a joyfulness in it too, and a transcendence. So it's just very exhilarating, or maybe the better word is exalting, to listen to you read your poetry. And you are a great talker, and I appreciate all that. But
Thank you.
I'm thankful for your truthfulness and your courage. So I have a couple of questions to ask you.
Thank you.
When did you write your first poem?
Ooh, that's easy. 8 years old. I
Pardon?
remember. Oh, when I was 8 years old.
Whoa.
I'll never forget it. Yeah. I knew that I was going to be a poet. I didn't know what that meant in the bigger world. I was surrounded by poetry as a child, being of Armenian ancestry. My father was from Lebanon. My mother was from Syria. I think I may have said that already. I apologize. We're of Armenian descent. So there was always a poem to recite, to sing, put to music. There were always songs that were sung that were from poems. And the people that were exalted the most in history were not politicians, or they were the poets. The poets were always like, it was God and then poetry and then grandma. It was like poets and grandma, that kind of thing. But so I started at a very, very young age. And I think I was probably, in elementary school. I told my parents, I'm a poet and I'm going to be a poet. And if people haven't heard of me, it's just because I'm not really impressed by a lot of things out there. I just keep writing. I'm more impressed that like the heart still pounds every morning, and, the miracle of the body and the miracle of the natural world that still survives despite what we've done to it and all that. But yeah, so I knew since I was 8 years old that I was going to be a poet.
Well, what is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
Oh, that's that I can do that one too. I think it's because I say a lot. I'm a talker. So I love to challenge myself. And I think I've always liked the rhythm in poetry. I like the fact that the line forces me to control myself. Like, I feel like if I write prose, I could go on forever. I mean, this is volumes. Who's going to read this, So I'm thinking if I write a poem, I could be musical, but at the same time, I can control myself and really, really say what I want to say. Concise language, say what I want to say in the smallest amount of space. And also, I hate to throw this in, but I really think this is part of it. Being the only daughter, and I had 2 older brothers. So being the only daughter was very challenging. I had to learn what I needed to say in the shortest space, smallest amount of time, because everyone was always speaking over me. We grew up with 7 people in the house. I had my parents, my 2 older brothers, my grandmother and my Syria who had come, my grandmother and my aunt who had come from Syria when I was 6 years old. So imagine a little girl saying, I'm hungry too. So you learn that you better say fewer words and louder because no one's going to hear you otherwise.
You got it right the first time when you were 8 years old. You certainly have fulfilled that. I don't know if you'd call it a prophecy, but your calling. Who are some of the poets, when you got older, or maybe you were old at 8 in terms of your knowledge, but whenever it was that you really started writing poetry in a serious, regular way, who are some of the poets that you had read before that time who influenced you?
Well, I remember when I was in high school and I went to De Anza College in Cupertino, and I took a poetry class for the first time. And I'll never, I always bring this up because it's true. It's true. Why would I say otherwise? We read in class Marge Piercy's poem, Love Like a Ticking Bomb. And when we read the poem, I said, oh my God, can you do that with poetry? Can you be irreverent? Can you say those things? Can you, that kind of thing. And I was so excited. And I tried my hand at it. And of course, I was only beginning, but then I went to UCLA, and it's been a great journey because I discovered people like Adrienne Rich, who I always go back to, Sharon Olds, Lucille Clifton, oh my goodness. And then, Pablo Neruda. There's this little group, it's kind of like your group of friends that you always go back to those friends, no matter what happens, like I'll go, in recent years too, like, Yusuf Komunyaka, Philip Levine, God, there's so many. It goes on and on, but, those are some of the names that come up.
And Lory, when you sit down to write a poem, do you have an idea? Do you have a phrase? Do you have an image? Is just words? What is it that kicks off a poem for you in your mind?
Well, every second of the day, I think in poems. It's really tiring. I'm exhausted because I wake up and everything is poetry in my mind. And so I drive William's my husband. So I drive him crazy because I'm like, you know what? I thought of 5 great poems, but I have no time to write them down because I got to take the kids to school. I got to do the dishes. I got to call the dentist, my dentist, and the kids. Like, it just goes on and on. I'm usually angry. I'm angry most of the time. Angry, bitter. I write about anger and bitterness. I laugh because, one day, I got to share this little anecdote. One day I was at Descanso Gardens with my sons, who were then like babies, in the double stroller. And these 5 beautiful women were just guffawing like you wouldn't, like their laughter was so wonderful. I just got up because this is the type of person I am. I got up and I said, can I ask you, how is it that you laugh like that? I just love it. I just love your laughter. I love it so much. I wish I could just sit with you and just laugh with you. And the woman turned to me and she said, we laugh because we know. And I said, wow, yeah. Okay, thank you. I get it. So poetry is with me 24/7. It's with me when I sleep. I wish I could write faster. I'd be on my 5th book. If life had been different, I should be on my 5th book right now, but I think that's not the way to think. I think we have to believe in the process and believe in our journey, Like, I'm so grateful to be here. Like, I think there's a Buddhist teaching that says, if you wonder where you should be, look down at your feet. So right now, I'm meant to be at Harry's Poetry Hour, and I'm like so grateful for it.
Well, my late wife, Holly, was a poet, Holly Prado.
Oh, yeah.
One of her books, she had like a 1-line, obviously, title and a 1-line text, and it just said, I want to be someplace perfect. Okay, here I am. So I appreciate your living in the present. I try to live in the present too.
I love that.
Sometimes things happen and, you get fixated on something and you just, I write all the time too, and I read all the time. So, but our time is up, Lory, and I just want to thank you. I could say a number of things, but simply because that's what I think poetry is. You have to, be simple, the simplicity, and thank you for your truthfulness and your joyfulness, among other things. So it's been a real pleasure and an honor, Lory. So thank you very much, Lory Bedikian.
Thank you. I'm very honored to have been here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Our next poet, William Archila. William Archila is the winner of the 2023 Philip Levine Prize for Poetry for his collection, capital S is for FOR. He is the author of The Art of Exile, which was awarded the International Latino Book Award, and The Gravediggers Archaeology, which received the Letras Latinas Red Hen Poetry Prize. He was also awarded the 2023 Jack Hazard Fellowship. He has been published in Poetry Magazine, the American Poetry Review, Agni, Kenyon Review, Los Angeles Review Books, Pleiades, Prairie Schooner. He has work forthcoming in Agni, Indiana Review, the Georgia Review, Salamander, and Gethsemane, or Guest House, pardon me. Here's a superlative poet, William Archila.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you. And thank you, everyone here. I appreciate your attention. I'm not a talker like Lory, so you're lucky that you will be hearing from me in between the poems. It's exciting to read with Lory. We don't always get to read together. So thank you, Lory, for that beautiful reading. I'm going to read some poems from my first two books, The Art of Exile and Gravedigger's Archaeology. And then I'm going to read some new poems, and then maybe we can talk. But first, a poem from my first book, The Art of Exile. This poem is based on my days in San Francisco before I decided to stay in LA. And I wrote this poem thinking of all the Salvadorian children, or Salvis as they are called now, who fled the war in the 80s, fatherless, and came to California. And then after school, spend their nights in the city streets while their parents work, probably the graveyard shift. This is for Henley. It always starts here over the chain link fence with crooked fingers, leather shoes running across railroad tracks. No sound but a gasp for breath. Our white shirts flapping like flags, cops in black behind. Sometimes it's you kneeling at the corner of the liquor store, handcuffed, baton blow to your back, flopping to the ground, a grunt of flesh and bone, your golden tooth shining. This is what I remember when I drive through East LA, the boys leaning against the wall, rising above trash cans, beer bottles, baggy pants and black shades, long white shirts with two clown faces above the left breast, one laughing, the other crying. I think we were 15 when we worked in the dark kitchen, restaurant heat of vegetables and spices, bags of rice, box from China. During breaks, you stood in the alley, your shirt over the shoulder like a towel, whistling, all the girls strolling their short skirts, exposing the lighter skin of their bodies. Around midnight, after carrying the last crate of dishes, we untied our wet aprons. I sat across from you, munching on bread, Italian sausages, swigging on a bottle of wine, your talk thick as honey, marijuana visions of North America, blonde girls and their bikinis, low riders at night, you in a suit, and Bruce Lee. 15 years will pass before I think of you again. Deportation to a village between cane fields at dusk. Your disappearance between the Eucharist and the clang of the bell early Sunday morning. I'm a teacher now. Fingers of chalk, papers piled around me. Sometimes in the dark eyes of students, you appear. Your white shirt, shiny shoes, your back slouch at the bore, cracking the English grammar. On the street, corner, a boy flashes a hand sign, and it all starts again, climbing over the fence, running through East LA. So that's from my first book. I'm going to move on to my second book, The Gravedigger's Archaeology. Before Lory and I had twin boys, this is about 10 years ago, we bought this fixer-upper house And there was a lot of digging to do, a lot of digging involved, and my father helped me with the plumbing and the bathrooms and the kitchen floor and the roof, et cetera, et cetera. In one way, this poem is an homage to Seamus Heaney because it's a way to dig into the ground as it is a way to dig into memory. But it's also about my father, mainly about my father. He passed away at the beginning of the pandemic. Dig. I can tell you this much because I always begin with picks and shovels, pencils and spoons, because I always return as a worm 6 feet below, breathing a thing of leather and bone. Because over the nose, the skin breaks into a ditch, the belly sinks. I can tell you what rose to the surface because of the arrowheads washed and cataloged, because of the mountains crumple like butcher paper, graver and vessel found in the strata, because of the ravines broken off into chasm, fossils back into the waters. And if there's more, it will be my father always trudging uphill, lugging his 200 pounds of flab, exhausted, nostalgic, and melancholic. Because come daybreak, he'll be at it again, shirt hanging on a branch, spade turning the earth, exposing the loam to light. And if there's truth in work, I learned it from him among the junkyards of auto parts, brake drums, and pistons burned. In the preserves he delivered as a boy, exiled from childhood, from Munich to Morazan, from the curl of a flugelhorn to the ivy's weather bane. If there's more to say, it's because I loved in groundwork and fathoms, hieroglyphics, the slip through a hole in the wire fence, in trochees and dactyls, profound volume of the ocean, eye of the whale, sounding to the wheel, the captain strapped, trashing Leviathan. I can tell you this much because it's always my father who handles the claw hammer, screwdriver speckled with rust, because it's my father, without tape or yardstick, without compass or pocket loop, who tells me, lying under the house, cutting a trench for the pipe, dig, son, dig. All right. Okay, one more poem from the Gravediggers Archaeology. And this was kind of a personal one because I always have the issue of getting tongue-tied when meeting a poet or musician or artist that I admire. I just don't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to someone like Federico Garcia Lorca or Fernando Pessoa? Actually, I remember every time I read this poem, I think about this moment when Lory and I met Winter Marsalis. This is a long time ago. When we met him backstage, I just stood there while Lory and Marsalis went on chatting as if they had known each other for years, right? And I just stood there, and we walked out. We walked off stage, and I didn't say a thing. So I gave myself this challenge. If I were to meet one of my heroes, and I only had 3 minutes, what would I say? So I chose Charles Mingus, the jazz artist, pianist, composer, band leader, He's known for his temperament and his activism in the 60s. And this is called 3 Minutes with Mingus. When I read of poets and their lives, son of a milkman and seamstress, raised in a whistle-stop town or village, a child who spent his after-school hours deep in the pages of a library book, I want to go back to my childhood, back to the war, rescue that boy under the bed, listening to what bullets can do to a man. Take him out of the homeland, enroll him in school, his class size 10. Unfold the fables of the sea, a Spanish galleon slamming up and down the high waters. This is why I write poems, why I prefer solitude when I listen to your lazy sound of brass on the phonograph. You give language to black roosters and fossil bones. Break down phrases between the LA River and the yellow taxi cabs of New York. I picture you in Watts, the 240-pound wrath of a bass player building up steam. Woodshedding for the strictly segregated hood. Those who seek a tiny shot of God, digging through heart pan. The hummers grunt and blow. I need a gut bucket of gospel, the flat land of cotton, to catch all those Chinese acrobats bubbling inside your head. When I think of the day I will no longer hold a pencil within my hand or glance upon the spines of my books, I hear Picasso's Guernica in your half-choked cries, a great workhorse lost in a fire spiraling notes, a shrieking tenor sax for the woman falling out of a burning house. I want to tell you, if I wrote like you pick and pat in blues and roots, I would understand the caravel of my childhood, loose, without oars or sails, rolling on the swells of a distant sea. That's all I got, Mr. Mingus. I give you the archaeology of my words. Every painstaking sound I utter when I come to the end of a line, especially the stress beats of a tiny country I lost long ago. Okay. All right. Some new poems now. So these poems are from my new manuscript titled S is For. It is the current winner of the Philip Levine Prize for Poetry. And the book will be out in next year in February. This is an untitled sonnet. It's not a perfect sonnet. It's the ghost of a sonnet, a disheveled sonnet, if you will. It's 14 lines. There's loose musicality, no meter, no rhyme scheme, but some internal rhymes, off rhymes. It's the 4/4-2 structure, the Shakespearean structure. It has a volta, so that turn. All right. And this was published in Pleiades. Oh, and it's untitled. Posting, boasting, 80 rounds from an officer, burning, looting. The life of a miner always leads to a line of corpses. Segregated schools, segregated hoods, Not enough money in the bank for representation, for a voice, for a commercial. Be mindful of Minutemen, pilgrims, unidentified men on Hinge who donate money to all white men in suits executing laws. Take note of drug trafficking with the pistol of a teenage assassin. Pay attention to his invisible hoodie stitched to his head. Try to count backwards. Try days swollen and cracked backwards. Try School of the Americas in Georgia. Try Atlacatel Battalion. Try City Hall. Try the coroner's log. Be vigilant of the government as the ghost of God, including Michelangelo and his cadavers. Also taking care of other people's babies, cry babies, and shit loaders. Wiping, mopping. What else? What else makes you disappear? Before the pandemic, around 2016, I taught at the Westlake District to mostly unaccompanied minors. And so much of the time was spent on dealing with their social and mental issues. Every day they were coming with stories of poverty and gang violence, lack of education in their home countries, lack of economic opportunities. So this poem rises out of the experience, and it was published in a poetry magazine. It's called Central American Boys. That's BOYS. Central American Boys. The product they pack. Chronic culprit in love with bullets plaque like stars. The glance at each other crossing the street, the way they know their fathers will never come back. Profanity, yes. Illiterate, ill-nourished, most of them, most definitely. In addition, the brilliant genesis of Odysseus. They smell ghosts, like pale plates of water abandoned under the brush. It might as well be a jar of snares, mosquitoes, damn mosquitoes to get rid of, draining the blood for eggs. The memory of a stowaway hitting the ground again and again. Okay, let me see. So maybe I have time to read two more. Okay. So I'll read Three Sad Steps to Heaven, which was published in the Colorado Review. The title of this poem is an allusion to Miles Davis' Seven Steps to Heaven. And it's also an allusion to Philip Larkin's poem Sad Steps, which is also an allusion to another English poem by Sir Philip Sidney from his sonnet sequence. And in that poem, Sidney's poem begins with the line, with how sad steps, O moon, thou climbest the skies. Three Sad Steps to Heaven, after Philip Larkin. After installing the shelves in the pantry, mid-December, descending for a smoke, I go out for a steaming shot of fresh air on the patch of dead grass, which is to say, something must be done about the loneliness it takes to imagine the dead. which is a word with a lot of dead weight for the pallbearer, for dust light coming on like a tint of blue, nicked, with no attention to Mack trucks cussing like the B-side of a 45. Something tells me to climb the plaster tree house. Something tells me I am so near, so far. Don't confuse your pros and cons. Here a plane, here a crow locked on the telephone wire. 7-Eleven corner with more scrap yard cars spatting than the long crawl of ants. I can see from my 3 sad steps over the ivy's fence. I too shiver, knowing it's in the shaky rooftops of the Christmas trees. Out of dark mountain throats where the sky fades like a staircase, but I am no wolf howling at the moon's pallor. Inside me is a casket where I prefer the dead to this cold, muted moon. This fleck of foam puffing itself wide like a stare. There's as much darkness around the O's of the moon as there is much dirt in a grave. I love to hear you tell me what it's like to see me propped, what it's like to see me drift in and out of clouds. Tell me, at least, how my absence grounds you with the pin of a needle. No one walking the streets is here to see it. I think I'm going to close there. I'm going to stop there. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much, William. Some of your themes, family, father, wife, love, exile, you just tell them all with particulars and a strength of narrative and a superlative use of language and a inventiveness. And you also have such empathy for others, and your love of jazz. I just appreciate all that. I feel like a kid listening to a sagacious person. It just you just really there's a revelation in your writing. And you're talking about the archaeology. About you dig and you dug, and you brought death, struggle. People trying to just learn to live here in America and thrive and what they go through. You brought that all to us, and you've done it with such a erudition. So I could go on, but those are a few things that I appreciate about your writing. And so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions too. When did you write your first poem?
I came to poetry late. I think it must have been after 1992 when I traveled to El Salvador after the peace treaty was signed between the left and the right wing, what became political parties afterwards. The left wing became a political party. And so when I came back, I was having all these feelings of exile. And I needed to put it on paper, and it just came out of necessity. And I just started writing things down in a journal that I carry around with myself, and just kept at it without thinking that I was going to take this seriously, without thinking that I'm writing poems. It was a necessity. Poetry for me became something more of it opened a new world for me outside time, and it just gave me that how would you say that breath that I needed to take for such a long time, because I felt like I was running out of air. So it must have been to answer that question more directly. It must have been sometime after 92, maybe 93, 94, 95, around that time.
Well, you talk about, something outside of time. You certainly, and your wife, Lory, too, have certainly made this time out of time, a sacred place. And
There's an Eric Golfi album called Out of Time, so that's great.
and you also see the suffering of others, and you have that ability to empathize and to put it down on paper for all of us to understand a little bit more, if we're able to, what some of the people that you grew up with or that you see and what they have gone. So I appreciate your embracing in that, and I appreciate deeply your erudition. Right before you started writing seriously and in a regular way, who are a few of the poets who influenced your writing?
I think before I had decided to take this seriously, I'm from Latin America, a small country in Central America. So, we had read Pablo Neruda, we had read Rubén Darío from Nicaragua, local poets like Alfredo Spino, local poets in El Salvador, like Alfredo Spino. And Federico Garcia Lorca, those people were just part of the culture. When I came here, before I took this seriously, I had just come back from El Salvador in '92. I carry around a anthology of Latino poets from the '90s. I think it was called After Aztlán, and it had a collection of Chicano, Mexican American, Cuban, and Puerto Rican poets. And those poets were probably the first poets that I fell in love with in the English language. And then once I started writing and I was taking this seriously, just like Lory, I was heavily, and still am, heavily influenced by Yusef Komunyakaa from that first book. Well, it's not his first book, but that book, one of his early books, The Encantado. And Philip Levine, and back, I think it must have been in late '90s, I think, in one of those UCLA extension courses where I came across the poem, The Simple Truth. And from that moment on, I've been reading him since. So those are early poets that I think, and to this day, still influence me heavily.
Well, it's time for us to go. There's another program coming up at 2:00, and I just want to thank Lory. Lory, why don't you come on too if you're still here? But I want to thank both of you for such a glorious, revelatory, and I just deeply appreciate your embracing, what the humanity that's out there, not only externally, but internally, and lifting that up. And you both have lifted, me up, and I used the word exhilaration earlier, to a place of exaltation, something sacred. So I learned from both of you, and I'm thankful to you. And one last thing I have to, not that I have to, but I want to.
Because he knows that I'm going to ask.
Next week, we celebrate the poetry of the late Holly Prado. The reading from her book, of the title I love, Nothing Breaks Off at the Edge, with Phoebe McAdams, Allison Townsend, James Cushing, Barbara Crane, Celeste Goyer. So thank you once again, Lory Bedikian, pardon my pronunciation, and William Archila. It's really been a marvelous reading. Thank you, and thank you to our wonderful director, Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.